Hi, I'm Catherine, the author of TORIANA, and I'm going to be bringing you the next chapter. It's called Chapter 18, SATS Student 6337. Blessed is the man whose delight is in the law of the Lord. He shall be like a tree planted by rivers of water that brings its fruit in season. Psalm 1. I'd packed up my belongings that I had had in my mud house in Sohat, and I was ready for the big move to Okilang the next day. As I stood in front of my door under the tree that was now in full bloom, I watched the last rays of sunlight shining on the mountains. I watched my neighbors and their children directing their goats into their wooden woven kraals on their compounds. Chickens were being chased and put into their basket homes for the night. Families were sitting in circles on their grass mats, each on their own compounds, eating out of one circular plate and bowl. They were probably cupping cooked red sorghum with their fingers, together with cassava or pumpkin leaves and yellow flowers. Some young girls started singing. They sang songs of the happenings that day. We had had good rain, so they were all weeding that day. The men were in charge of preparing the ground and always worked together as a community. Each man's land would have a turn as the community of men moved from one plot to the other. They had beautifully made wooden hoes that were like large spears, with a hoe at the base and a dark wooden beam reaching high above their heads. They would work together in a line, in a rhythm, and often a song. Each of their hoes would hit the ground at the same time and then rise up at exactly the same pace and timing. The owner of the land would walk behind them throwing seeds on the ground. The women would form a line behind them, making sure the seeds were lightly covered with soil and any unnecessary weeds or grass was removed at the same time. The women of each family were also responsible for preparing what they called balu. That's brewed form of fermented sorghum. They also prepared large amounts of food that the women carried on their heads to the various fields that were sometimes more than 10 kilometers away. During my time as a student in the TIMO program, that's Training in Ministry Outreach, I'd been a learner for 2 years. I learned their culture, their language, and so much more. There were no cell phones, computers, or books, so information was passed from generation to generation through stories or songs. I worked a lot with children, and I realized that the best way to bring the gospel message to the people was through song and dance. Some of the girls in my village had joined me as we reworked some of their familiar songs with Lopid words. This time Lopid words beautifully wove the Bible stories from Genesis to Jesus' birth, death, and resurrection. In my time of learning, I also discovered that each village had a dance area with what they called the generational poles in the center of it. Each pole was an ancient long piece of wood that represented one family. Every pole of each family was woven together with another type of elastic moldable wood. These poles were all pulled together and were very symbolic to the whole village, and in a fire these poles would be removed and would travel with the people, so they would make sure that that was removed before the fire destroyed it. We made Bible songs and dramas that represented Adam's family, Noah's family, David's family, and many more that wove into a beautiful story. These stories explained where sin and sickness came from and introduced them to the person, Jesus, who saved them by his death and restores all mankind to himself if they would believe in him. I am thankful for the teams that helped me put this together. After each performance was finished, my Lopit people came and said to me that they finally understood the gospel story of Jesus Christ. Sohat village had heard the gospel many times in my mud house, in their dance area, and in the church at the bottom of the mountain, and now I felt called to bring the gospel to Okilang and other parts of the Lopit mountains that had not yet heard the gospel. I shared my plans in prayer updates and newsletters, and many people continued to support and pray with and for me. I received an incredible letter from a missionary who had once served in the Lopit Mountains. August 2011. Dear Kath, I felt I must write to you because I'm rejoicing that you have made contact with the people in the Murumlo pit. We had quite a bit of contact with those people in the 1950s. I cared for an orphan baby until he was about 9 months old, and from time to time after that. He was named Benjamin Lequoy. He had a sister by the name of Itwari. She also cared for him since his mother had died when he was born. I had a few contacts with him when he was a bit older, and once when he was fully grown and we had moved to Juba. He came to see me there, but I could never talk to him much about spiritual things. He just didn't seem to understand Otuho, and his language was quite different. I prayed for him for many years. Love, Martha. Well, you won't believe it. God made a way for me to meet him while we were in Murula Pit, and as I could speak a little Murula Pit, I was able to present the gospel to him. At that point, he decided to make commitment to Jesus Christ, and together with Pastor Julius from the African Inland Church, we prayed with him. We were thrilled to share this great news with Martha, and this was her response. Thanks so much, Kath, for your message about Benjamin. I can hardly believe it, as I have prayed for him for so long, and I nearly gave up. But when I heard that you were going to Murula Pit, I began to have hope again. So he heard the message and believed. I do thank you so much for finding him and telling him about Jesus. Give him my greetings and tell him I am so glad he has believed. Thank Julius too for his part. It is surely a wonderful answer to prayer. Lots of love in Jesus, Martha. The move to Okelang was a transition of living in tents and living simply for a time, and then God brought various people within our mission, as well as various Christian friends from Germany, South Africa, and America, to help me build a fully equipped container home. God also brought various people to join me at various stages of starting a ministry in Okelang, where we cleared the airstrip for food supplies and emergencies. We grew a base that we could operate from to spread the gospel and the ministry of God's word to various parts of the Low Pit Mountains. Tim, Clayton, Daniel, and Carol joined me for the first season, where we worked hard at getting the airstrip established for a team that joined us over Christmas. The team at Christmas helped build a bamboo church for us to disciple from in the Okelang village. Clayton had also made a Low Pit film of Moses, and there was also the Low Pit Jesus film. He, together with Daniel and others, took our portable equipment, and by foot, with other Low Pit Christian men, they brought the gospel to completely unreached parts of the Low Pit Mountains. In the midst of all this exciting ministry, I still continued my study with SATS. One particular week, I was trying to meet an assignment deadline, and I contracted malaria. I was on treatment, but the fevers, body shivers, headaches, and body pains were indescribable. I wrote to one of the SATS facilitators at the time that I could not meet the deadlines because of malaria. I was in the bush, so I had a malaria tester kit and medicine, no doctor's note that could be scanned and emailed. Later I discovered that I had not been given an extension, and I had been marked down. I was frustrated and upset, so I wrote to the SATS principal, Dr. Ruben van Rensburg, explaining my story. Also shared that I thought SATS would be more understanding and supportive of missionaries on the field. I was blown away by his response and help. He had his own children on the mission field, so he understood. At the same time, he understood that many of his staff perhaps didn't understand the world of a missionary, so he invited me to come and share at one of their morning devotions that they would put live to all the SATS facilitators all over the world. On my next sabbatical visit to South Africa, I went to share my life and my story with the SATS leadership, and then in their morning devotion, which was made live to all SATS facilitators. When they saw my mud house on the screen, and that I lived from rainwater and solar power that I could only use for midday for reading and assignments, they asked me how I possibly met all my assignment deadlines. I explained with difficulty. Once I had finished my presentation, one of the staff members asked if they could not make an offering for a Kindle that would enable me to do all my assignment readings in the evenings and would equip me for my SATS work. They then prayed for me. I felt so overwhelmed by God's love as I walked out of their devotion with all the money I needed for a brand new Kindle. This Kindle made a huge difference to my studies and getting assignments submitted well in time. After sharing at SATS, the professor that had a Greek in Masters and was an architect sent emails and encouragement and prayer, as well as supporting me financially. His emails were a blessing, and I truly felt loved by all the SATS staff. In the midst of incredible blessings, my computer that had been my only way of communicating to the outside world as well as writing and submitting assignments crashed. The screen went crazy. Thankfully, it was under warranty and it was sent in to be fixed. It took weeks, which meant I had no way of communicating to all my supporters. My weekly prayer updates and monthly newsletters was not sent out. When I finally received my computer back, all fixed, my inbox had 2 to 3 emails from this Greek professor with real concern, hoping I was still alive. He had not received my weekly prayer updates and thought I had contracted malaria and was really hoping I was still alive. His concern for me felt more than just a prayer supporter. But then I thought, no, I can't read into these things. I must just keep focused on my work that lay ahead of me, discipling the low-pit people in the Word of God.